longer.
No, we probably are about there. Anyway, we are recording this for future educational purposes, so keep the foul language to a minimum.
Yeah. Well, I think most of you know me. My name is Helga, and I am co-chair of the Adult Education Committee for Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Santa Rosa. And this is the latest in a series of classes / workshops that we have been holding. We started back in January. The title of the series is Criminal Justice or Injustice, question mark. So far we've had, as part of the series, we had one that was about a man who's serving a life sentence in an Alabama prison. Another focused on our local program at the Santa Rosa JC called Second Chance, which gives formerly incarcerated students assistance in making their way in college. Another one was, our last one was James Alexander, who told us in very moving words about his experience in the California prison system. And then we had Jerry Threed, who brought us up to date on ILERA and his work as a former, what's the title, John? Law auditor.
Yeah, law enforcement auditor and community
law enforcement auditor, right. So, so anyway, we're very pleased, our committee's very pleased to have been working with John. This is really John's brainstorm. He's come up with the speakers, including the panel tonight, and has been very generous in sharing his expertise. I want to just take a moment before we start to go over Zoom a little, in case any of you aren't so familiar with it. The first thing I would point out is that on my screen at the top right-hand corner, there's a speaker view and a gallery view. So if you do the gallery, you're going to see all of us. If you do the speaker, it will focus on whoever is speaking. There's also a little broken square right next to that, which will expand to a full screen. So then if you go down to the bottom, you've got a mute button, so you can always mute yourself, although we'll probably mute everyone until we get to the Q&A, except for the speakers, of course. Stop video if you want to leave the room or you prefer the rest of us not to see you. You can always stop the video. You'll see you'll be able to see other people, but they won't see you. Now, participants, if you click on that on the right, you'll have a list of everyone who's joined for this meeting. And yeah, the chat button we'll use later as this panel is speaking. If you think of a question, you can click on the chat button and send a message to everyone. And then at the end of our time, John will act as a moderator, and he will answer questions. As Chris mentioned, he is recording. I think that's pretty much it. Have I forgotten any key thing, Chris? No? Okay, well, it's a pleasure, of course, to introduce Reverend Chris Bell. He's a leader of our church along with our other leaders, and he's going to make a few comments.
Yeah, I just want to get right into the meat of things, so I'll only take a moment to say thanks to everybody for being here and for your interest in this issue, and which is a passionate concern for a number of people in the congregation, and certainly of our friend and fellow member. I'll out you, John, a member of the congregation whom I trust everyone remembers ran for sheriff recently as well. And so particularly grateful to you again, John, for bringing us all together this way. And just to also point out, I'm sure you mostly all know that the ordinance is named in honor of Evelyn Cheatham, who was a friend and associate of many in the congregation, and whose organization, Worth Our Weight, we've supported, well, until it ended, loyally for decades, I dare say. And Evelyn herself cooked for a number of our congregational events, particularly in the early days when I was here. So there's no better way to honor her remarkable life. And just thank you for being here and paying attention to what we've got to offer for you. And I guess I'll throw it over or back to you, Helga, or to John.
Well, I just want to say a few more words about John, and that is he's a full-time advocate for reform in the area of law enforcement. He's a former station commander for the LA Police Department, and he significantly shifted the way that his area, his officers interface with the community. And that was a big shift in the police culture there at the time. He's also advocated for restorative justice as a way of trying to prevent youth from entering the criminal justice system. And he's, as Chris alluded to, he's been really active not only in our congregation, but in this community. And he's brought together a remarkable panel with a lot of experience in this subject. So, John, take it away.
Great, thank you, Helga. Thank you, Chris. So I want to just highlight what Measure P is all about initially, and introduce our panelists. Next for the hour, after I introduce them, we'll show a brief video that captures kind of the essence of the challenges we see across the country. It just happened that it occurred here in Sonoma County. And then we'll ask the panel members to give us a brief kind of response to what they see. And then we'll go into questions for the panel members. You've seen some of them in the bulletin, why Oversight now? What's your experience with Oversight? And what do we need to know as a community about Oversight? So that'll take us up to Q&A. We'll have our Q&A and I'll direct those questions to the panel. And then we'll conclude at 8 o'clock. And I can stay over a little bit afterwards. And that'll be our session. That's how it's going to go tonight. Before I introduce our panelists, just to highlight what Measure P is all about. And we'll have the website, the Measure P website in the chat box so you can take a look at it and learn more. And we're like 1 or 2 days away from really elevating that website to a whole new level. So if you check it tonight, check it again in a day or so, because it's really going to be an impactful website. We've been working very hard for it. And as you know, our time is short with this. We put together the campaign and worked very hard, and we've got signs coming up and all kinds of things. We're raising money, and we only have 5 weeks left. So go to that website and take a look more. But here are the highlights for Measure P for your information. It increases accountability and oversight of the sheriff's office, and provides an independent role for the community to really review the actions of the sheriff. It provides for subpoena power for ILARO and for full and independent investigations of officer-involved shootings. ILARO also can recommend disciplinary action for officers found to have committed misconduct. it mandates cooperation for the sheriff to in matters, questions that ILRO has, and providing information that's needed, correlations between law enforcement and demographic data. It also significant, it allows for the audit of racial profiling data collected by the sheriff to analyze trends and correlations in that data, particularly to use of force. It authorizes ILRO to investigate every civil lawsuit against the sheriff's office that involves excessive use of force. And lastly, the highlight is elevates the role and importance of community advisory council to improve community oversight. And I can go into some critical numbers here a little bit maybe later at the end, you know, about the millions of dollars that have been paid out for litigation, you know, the budget and so on like that. I can talk about that later. So what I'd like to do next is introduce our panel. So first I'd like to introduce Cheryl Dorsey. Cheryl, can you wave your hand there? We've got a lot of people here. So Cheryl's retired Los Angeles police sergeant. She's a speaker, a much sought after expert. She's a frequent commentator on CNN, HLN, MSBNC, KPCC. This is a mouthful, Cheryl. And she's also the author of The Creation of the Manifesto, Black and Blue. Cheryl Dorsey. Cheryl, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, John.
Yes. Next we have Susan Jones. Susan is an openly gay woman who took bold steps to overcome gender discrimination and rose to the top leadership position in law enforcement against all odds. In addition to having acted as the Healdsburg police chief, she has also served as Healdsburg's mayor and city council member, and has also been a law enforcement instructor as well. Next, we have John Eisenberg. John has more than 4 decades of experience in appellate litigation. He's the author of a leading treatise on California civil appellate practice and is the past president of the California Academy of Appellate Lawyers. John has argued dozens of cases in California Supreme Court and nearly 100 cases in the California Courts of Appeal and the United States Courts of Appeal for the Ninth Circuit and the District of Columbia. So you can see we have an extraordinary panel aimed at educating you and answering all your questions. And the experience that this panel has is you know, is just amazing. So thank you all for being here and on this time. So what I'd like to do next is to show the video, Chris. It's just a brief video. I can give you background information about this. Jason, who is the victim of this attack. Jason was a local gang member in Santa Rosa. He came from a very difficult family situation, a very dysfunctional family situation, lots of abuse. And he served time in Susanville, the penitentiary. And during that time, he was exposed to the Quakers' Alternative to Violence Project, a well-known project that is that the Quakers have in the California state prison system. And Jason really transformed his life as a result of that. And so he was paroled, came out here to return to Sonoma County, and got a job working as a carpenter, and he immediately began to be targeted by local law enforcement. And why is that? Local law enforcement wanted to return him to prison because he was a gang member, former gang member, and a parolee. And I stayed in touch with Jason all along the way. And so there were many things that happened to him along the way. And that last chapter in Grayton where he was attacked was simply, you know, the last expression the sheriff's office had in terms of trying to return him to prison. So today, Jason is a facilitator for the Alternative to Violence Project and a rare human being. Just to let you know a little bit about him, and I can answer more questions about him if you'd like. This video was taken by his 15-year-old daughter, who was traumatized by the entire incident. The woman who tries to intercede and come in front of him, between him and the sheriffs, is his fiancée. So this all happened at his home. It was an erroneous call, and there was never any effort by the sheriffs to authenticate the complaint. They were really focused on him and getting him in custody. So, you know, Chris, if we can roll the film, it's just a few minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, got it. And I'll just let everyone know there's some kind of commentary from the poster of this, one of the better versions we could find, whose username is derp. So there is some, you know, commentary along the way that's not associated with these folks or our effort here. It's just the best we could do.
No! I'm not going nothing. Stay back! Stay back! Stay, keep face down! Okay. Put your face on the ground!
The dog's eating my leg! The dog's eating my leg! Oh, please, the dog's eating my leg, bro. Please, it's
they can take it off if they wanted to.
I'm not
It's gonna be okay! It's gonna be okay!
Let his mouth done it! What are you doing?
This is harassment. We didn't do anything. We got attacked. This is harassment. No, Mom. Are you okay, Mom? Are you okay? Mom, that is my mom. I want to make sure my mother is okay.
Can I explain something?
No.
If you don't want to listen, I can't help you.
No, I want to make sure my mom is okay. You guys came here for no reason, harassing us. For no reason. What's the reason? I want to hear the reason.
If you want some rational conversation,
I want to hear
I
the
can
reason.
provide that to you.
Provide it for me.
You need
Provide it.
You need to listen to me.
I'm listening.
And treat me in the same manner I'm treating you.
You're harassing my family.
I just got here.
Well, you guys are harassing my family. You guys took a police dog on my stepdad.
Someone smack these niggas out here. fuck are you guys waiting for?
No, he is right.
Then you might want to stand
No.
over there because I'm going to secure this residence.
This is my home. I live here. Go ahead. You guys have no warrant. This is illegal. You guys took a police dog on him for no reason. He was complaining. He was on the floor with the dog
We're
beating
going to get a
him.
warrant. Okay? We're going to get a warrant.
Where is my mother? I want to speak to my mom. This is not right.
Bend your legs as much as you can and you sit up for us, okay? On the count of 4, let's go. 1, 2, 3. There we go. What's the resistance, dog? I was laying down and shit the dog up. No fucking reason.
Thank you, Chris. Disturbing video. I was in conversation with Jason after he was admitted to the hospital. He went through a series of surgeries. Fortunately, there was an excellent wound doctor at the local hospital. And initially, it was believed that he may lose his leg. Unfortunately, that did not happen. There were also pictures of the wound that was circulated in the media, and it was absolutely horrible. You know, and as you can see, there was a long delay in getting the dog off his leg. And there's background information about that I can tell you later if we have time. So just breathe a little bit. This happened in Sonoma County, the town of Grayton. And it's not, you know, it's happens, these kinds of things happen around the country, unfortunately. The sheriff's version of this was that, you know, hey, he was resisting arrest. You know, he will be prosecuted, and we were just taking him into custody. You know, as I told John, the district attorney dropped all charges once they saw the video and all the information. And currently, Jason is being represented by a local attorney, and the case is going to be litigated, of course. So let me start off by just getting some, you know, some remarks, just brief, maybe 2 minutes from each of the panel members about this incident and your feelings about it. Cheryl, would you like to start?
Sure. So let me say this real quick. If they are in need of an expert for that litigation, please put us in touch.
Okay.
As I watch it, what it looks to me like is the officers were more intent on punishing this young man than really getting him into custody. I don't know how you can be a canine handler and not be in control of your canine. It doesn't make sense to me. And John, you know, like I do, that sometimes, you know, officers will reward canine and let him get a little chew time as a treat, if you will, for being a good canine officer. And so I don't know if the officer was really having a hard time getting the dog off of him, or if he was just letting the dog do that thing that he does, which is, you know, have a little fun with this gentleman. And so I'm not surprised that the charges, whatever they came up with initially, were not filed, that it was a DA reject. We know that when officers put their hands on you, or when officers harm you, or when officers use deadly force, they have to act in some manner. They can't just beat you up, have you assaulted, let a dog bite you, and then just let you go. They have to try to justify that use of force. And so many times it's not uncommon that after the fact, and they understand that when they're doing it, but again, once officers put hands on you, they have to take you to jail for something. And so then it becomes a DA reject, and all of the trials and tribulations that go along with that, going to jail. In this case, it was going to jail and the hospital and whatever else, whatever other costs he may have incurred. And so it's very troubling to see. We're going to continue to have these kinds of outrageous, egregious behaviors unless and until a police administrator is willing to admit that that wasn't necessary. And we know why they won't, because there's civil litigation, right? And so they're never going to give a soundbite that would say anything contradictory that would help when they have to sit down and actually write that check that they're going to ultimately have to write. And so I'm saddened by it. I'm sorry that that young girl had to go through all of what she went through. I would imagine you let me know if mom was also arrested, because it looked like they had put hands on her as well. And that just brings a whole nother dynamic to the family if both parents were gone and they had a 15-year-old left behind.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's unfortunate that these things continue to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl. Susan, your remarks.
It is unfortunate that these things continue to happen. And Cheryl, you hit the nail on the head with everything. I was in shock watching it. It didn't look like, and I couldn't tell either about the canine. I couldn't tell if he couldn't control the dog, or like you said, he was just letting him have a little chew time. It was horrific and disgusting and sickening. And, you know, I love police. The good ones are awesome, awesome people. But when you get bad cops out there, it just tarnishes the badge for everybody. And I mean, this just makes me sick.
Yeah, for sure.
We need oversight.
Yeah, for sure, Susan. Thank you very much. John?
You know, I watched this video for the first time this afternoon. And after one viewing of it, I thought, I have no idea what's going on here. I got to watch this again. I ended up watching it 5 or 6 times to really fully understand what was going on. And a lot of questions arose. But let me tell you what stood out to me. And I'm watching this now as a lawyer, looking at what's gone wrong, who's at fault, is there a danger of the city being liable here, the county? So what stands out to me right away is the first thing Jason, is that his name, Jason?
Yeah, Jason.
First thing Jason says is, I'm not doing nothing. And he's got his hands out.
Yeah, right.
He's cooperating at all times. The next thing you know, he's on the ground and the dog is coming after him. And he's holding his hands behind his back to allow himself to be cuffed. He's not resisting, he's helping out. And that dog gets on him and doesn't let go. So my first question is, why did they set the dog on him?
Right.
Now, the handler seems to lose control of the dog. And initially, the notes I have here, is this a failure of the dog or a failure of the officer? Not until 5 minutes ago had I ever heard the phrase chew time.
No.
It didn't even occur to me the officer was giving the dog chew time. Oh my God. All right, there's a question. Have they failed to train the dog properly? Has the officer been untrained, or has he been malicious? A little later on, another officer, while the dog has his jaws clamped down on Jason's right leg, another officer stomps down on his left leg. Is that necessary? Jason's not resisting. He's cuffed by now. Is that excessive force?
Right.
By the way, Mom, it took me 4 viewings or so to realize she, in the background, is also cuffed. What's that about? And the daughter says, I want to know why this is going on. I want to hear the reason. And the officer will not answer that question. Is that standard operating procedure? She complains, you don't have a warrant to this. And the officer says, we're going to get a warrant. Wow. Okay. As a lawyer representing Jason, I'm going to love that comment. Is this the right way to treat this daughter under stress? Her father has his leg being chopped. Her mother is under arrest. This is wild. And they're not answering her questions. And near the end, she says, this is not right. And wow, she's right.
She is right.
That's not right. So I want to know what this is all about. And this is what police oversight, civilian oversight is all about, is finding out what happened here, what went wrong, how could it have been done better, how can we make this better?
Yeah. Thank you, John. So this gives us the opportunity to really, we have this example, that we're looking at, with a lot of questions around it. Let me ask you, Cheryl, how does this connect to oversight in your mind, with your experience and of the police culture? As Susan said, the majority of what we do know is the majority of officers are trying to do a good job out there, and in fact doing a good job. But how does oversight impact the culture?
Well, I'm not so sure if it's the oversight or the lack thereof, coupled with a lack of transparency and honesty, because we all know what we saw. And oftentimes, again, because litigation is around the corner, we have someone who's in a position of authority within a department whose sole purpose is to minimize and mitigate the bad behavior, try to explain away because they're the authority. And you know how they always want to say, well, if you've never worn the uniform, you have no idea. And so what you saw wasn't punishment. What you saw was an uncooperative suspect who was refusing to obey the commands of the officer. They told him to quit moving. Well, I don't know if I could sit still if a dog was eating my leg to the extent that that dog was. And to know that he almost lost his leg, I mean, that was more than just a nip on him. And so they tried to narrate and have us believe that we can't trust our eyes. And again, I go back to, unless and until they're willing to admit wrongdoing, and there's no harm in that. We can use this as a training issue if we want to. We can talk about the tactics, the reason for using the dog in the first place on someone who was standing in a compliant position, if you will, surrendering. If you just want to make it a training issue, but we first have to admit that it was excessive.
Yeah.
And we can't go forward until we at least admit that.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. Susan, having the experience of being a chief of police, and I know you've served as an interim chief of police in other locations as well that we didn't mention, and your experience as an instructor in law enforcement, placing yourself as the chief of police or as a sheriff, how does oversight either hurt this situation or make it better?
I believe it makes it better. I've always believed that transparency develops trust with the police, with the community. We open our doors. I mean, for me, the highlight of policing was back in '92 when community policing became the big thing. And I was at that time a commander for Concord PD down in the East Bay. And it was wonderful because we had invited the public in, and aside from citizen academies, we actually had the public do ride-alongs and volunteer. We had a volunteer force. It was great. When we had issues that came up, we talked about building that bank of trust. And if we did have a bad thing happen, when you had that big bank of trust going for you, you could take a withdrawal and not really hurt yourself. But when you start closing your doors, as I said in the last meeting, circling your wagons and not letting the public in, when something bad happens, the public doesn't trust you. So they're going to think that you're doing something wrong or that you're not giving them the information they need. And then with the videos that we have now, that clearly was not right. What we witnessed. So civilian oversight, I think, is a great thing to have. It's actually part of community policing, and we should have it, every department.
Great. Thank you, Susan. John, John, my understanding is that you've actually had experience in the civilian oversight of law enforcement field. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yes, I live in Healdsburg now, but I've been here 5 years. Before that, I lived 36 years in Oakland. And about a dozen years ago, I was appointed to the Oakland Citizens Police Review Board, the previous Oakland version of Iolera. They've got a very different sort of thing now. They call it commission. I did not spend long on that commission because I realized after a few months that it was a sham. It had no power. The Oakland police opposed it just without restraint. And in one of our hearings, I encountered the head of the Oakland Police Officers Union, a man named Barry Donnellan. And I saw the degree of resistance from the Oakland police officers at that time. That was a dozen years ago. I felt like this is hopeless. I would rather not have anything to do with this than give credibility to a sham.
Right.
The situation in Oakland has changed now. They have a much stronger police commission. There is a measure on the ballot in Oakland in November as well to increase the powers of that commission even further. And to my amazement, I saw 2.5 weeks ago in the San Francisco Chronicle that very same Barry Donnellan, head of the Oakland Police Officers Association, is endorsing the thing. And this is a quote from him. He said, "The thinking is that instead of going back and forth about all this and that with the commission, let's give them everything they need." And I thought, this is a guy who's really made progress from a dozen years ago, opposing at all costs, to now learning to live with this.
Right.
I think one of the biggest problems, challenges to police oversight, civilian oversight, is police officer resistance. Right. Oakland police have learned to live with it. I think they've seen that it's not a threat to them. And that speaks volumes to me. If I were still in Oakland, I'd want to be back on that commission now. But I'm not going back to Oakland. I love Healdsburg.
I was going to say that would be a little bit of a stretch. Yeah. Well, thank you, John, for sharing your experience. So across the country, unions have opposed any form of transparency and oversight. It's just been a matter of what they do. What we do know also is that these police unions, if you want to call them that, don't represent everyone. They don't. They're usually a smaller peer group, strong personalities that are just willing to protect the status quo. So it'll be interesting to see, because people ask me all the time, what do we do with these police unions? Well, the first step is to move toward oversight and balance the power instead of being out of balance. So it's, I'm glad that they have that effort going on in Oakland, John, and also San Francisco. And we know about over 70% of the voters voted for oversight, strengthening oversight in Los Angeles. So we're in a new era, and it's really time for us here to really look at oversight for ourselves and see if we can, make that big stretch for us. So we're at about 7:42 right now. What I'd like to do now is open it up to Q&A. We have around 30 people here involved, and if you would submit your questions to the chat box for our panel members, we'll do the best to answer any of your questions and start with that. So let's see what we have. Oh, when did this occur? Good question.
I answered that. It was early April of this year. It was the beginning of April 2020.
Good. Yeah, I do know that Jason was in the hospital for a couple weeks. And then today, today he is with his family, his wife, who was arrested, as you pointed out, John. The charges against her for resisting arrest and obstruction of justice were dropped, of course. And so they are living out of the Grayton area and just trying to put their lives together. It continues to, be a traumatic situation, experience for them. So next question, does Measure P need a simple majority or 2/3 to pass? Just 50 plus 1. We've got a good shot of getting it passed. And the polling that's been done indicates that while people in Sonoma County support their police, they do believe that oversight is necessary. So that's politically a good thing to know. Yes, John.
I just want to add that it does not need a 2/3 majority because it doesn't raise taxes.
Right.
That's an important thing to keep in mind.
Yep.
It does not raise taxes at all. It is funded through the sheriff's department.
Right. And good point, John. And the Board of Supervisors have already budgeted for ILRO at this level. So it's important to note. There's no increase in taxes for this. So, any other questions?
Nadine, we know, I think, everybody here, John, so let me say, there might be some people for whom typing is not the easiest thing. I think we could take a verbal question.
Yeah, why don't we do that, Chris? Yeah.
You could wave a hand or use the electronic feature in the participants thing. Helga has a question. Don't forget to unmute.
I just unmuted myself. If by chance it doesn't pass, would the Board of Supervisors be enabled to make it law in and of themselves?
The Board of Supervisors initially had that option, Helga, where they could have actually passed it themselves as the Board of Supervisors. They chose not to do that. They chose to put it on the ballot so that this could go to the people.
Okay.
So, and by the way, this is the only tool the Board of Supervisors has for sheriff accountability. There isn't any other option. So it's quite a critical decision.
I thought I saw Barbara Brzezinski commenting to clarify that the money it's funded through the general fund of the county.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Raised hands, Nadine, followed by Sarita, and then we'll turn back to the chat.
I just want to know, where does this stand? Where does this incident stand? Is it in trial? Is it going to trial? Is he being?
The matter's been filed, and the county has the option of settling or going to court. So
Okay.
I'm not sure where it is.
What do you think? John, what do you think they'll do?
Well, that's a good question. In the case of Andy Lopez, who was killed in 2013, it was just last year that the county finally settled. So they delay. And it wasn't until the Ninth Circuit took a position where they didn't feel that the Deputy Gilhouse, was in danger when he killed Andy Lopez, the Ninth Circuit. So the county then appealed it, and their appeal was not granted. The Supreme Court wouldn't hear it. So at that point, the county was facing going to trial. And it was at that point that they settled, which, John, you can talk about the strategy that usually occurs in these areas as an appellate lawyer, but that's where that case is right now.
Thank you.
John, did you have something to add to that?
Other than to point out that when the strategy in defending these cases is usually fight to the bitter end and settle at the last minute. That causes the county's liability insurance rates to go up. Sonoma County's liability insurance rates went up by what, $3.5 million this year? It's because of problems like this. This is why civilian oversight eventually has the effect of saving money, not just in damages judgments against the county, but also the cost of liability insurance.
Yes, and one other thing too is that once the settlement is agreed, the matter is sealed. So the point here with the sheriff's office is they don't want the facts of this case to be known. So that's troubling as well.
Sarita is next.
Do you know what the sheriff's department attitude is toward Measure P? Are they mounting real resistance to it?
Anyone want to answer that question?
Well, allow me.
Okay.
I do. Sheriff Essex himself, his chief complaint is that it would be unconstitutional by giving the IOLERA subpoena power without authority from the state legislature to do so. And he was threatening litigation over that. Today, Governor Newsom, signed legislation giving counties and cities like Sonoma County the power to give subpoena power to civilian oversight boards. So as of a few hours ago, the state legislature and the governor eliminated Sheriff Essex's major opposition, major reason for opposing the bill. I don't know what he would say now, but he doesn't have that argument anymore.
Right.
That's huge, John.
That is.
Yeah, that is, my name is Barbara Grasecki, and I've been working with John, and Susan on this measure. And just a word about AB 1185, just as a point to kind of reinforce what Chief Jones and Lieutenant Dorsey have been saying, and also, John Mutz, as opposed to John Eisenberg. I was a part of a lobbying effort on AB 1185, and we originally thought that our state senator Bill Dodd might be in opposition. He's been very closely associated with the unions. They've been giving him a lot of support, and in the past he'd been a very difficult vote on something like this. And so we arranged a call with the Senator Dodd to have a conversation about AB 1185. And so, we get on the phone and I'm like, we're here to talk about AB 1185. And he goes, oh, I'm supporting it. And the reason he's supporting it is because of all of the misconduct in the Vallejo Police Department. So they had hired a new chief in Vallejo who is trying to do the right thing and weed out the bad apples and the bad performance, get the appropriate training, set the appropriate leadership that all these amazing law enforcement people on this call have been talking about. And he was thwarted. He was thwarted every step of the way by the unions. And so he was absolutely not, he totally voted for it, which for those of you that I'm sure a lot of you are very tuned into the process. One of the ways that you can support it, but not have to put your name down, is to just not vote. He took a positive vote, and as did my assembly member, Jim Wood in Healdsburg, who's also sometimes someone who's a no vote. He took a positive vote. So that just goes to show you the way the winds are changing and how people are realizing how important oversight is to support all these amazing people in leadership and law enforcement that need this. And unfortunately, in many cases, they're fighting their own unions. So that was just like eye-opening, because we had all these we had a whole list of things that we knew he was, all the arguments lined up, and he's like, I'm voting for it. And we're like, oh, I guess we don't need to call you anymore. Anyway, I just wanted to share that to just kind of, again, support what all these amazing people are saying.
Yeah. Thank you, Barbara. It's that kind of lobbying from people who are really committed that'll shift the influence. Just a short time ago, you wouldn't get politicians to stand up and do this. You wouldn't even get our local board of supervisors to do it. So we have some momentum here. We just have to make sure we work very hard and do everything we can to get this passed in about 5 weeks. So, Susan, you mentioned the fact that Oversight is on the field of community policing. If you're really committed to it, it's a major element.
Yes, yeah. Goes back to the police are the public and the public are the police.
Yeah. Cheryl, you had in the queue, were the officers disciplined? That's a great question. We don't know, and we're not likely to know because that information is kept confidential. It's a great question. There has been a record in the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office where not only have they not been, that deputies have not been disciplined, but they've not had any training or anything like that as a result of these use of forces. So again, without oversight in this area, nothing will really change.
John, a question from earlier in the chat, and a little time check for you as well. How can we reach across the aisle to folks who are concerned about defunding the police and reframe this conversation for them, get them on board, as it were?
Yeah, good question. Any of the panel members want to answer that?
I think that, I think if it's approached with bringing in the public to develop trust and become a true community, and that it isn't defunding the police. The amount that is coming out of the sheriff's budget for this is really a small amount. It's 10% or 1% of his budget.
Mm-hmm.
It's $1.8 million. Mm-hmm. His budget is $180,500,000, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, he runs a jail, so it takes that. But I can tell you, he has a lot of really big toys and nice equipment. And 1.8 is not going to hurt his budget.
And just to clarify, that money actually doesn't, it's not in the ordinance. It is not saying that we're taking sheriff's money out of his budget to fund ILERO.
Right,
it's setting a minimum amount of funding. So that money comes from the general fund. So that's up to the Board of Supervisors to figure out where to apply that money. And by the way, if we weren't paying out $6.6 million in damages in civil cases every year, we would have some money to be able to do that. And also our insurance rates wouldn't be going up by 46%, which is just under 3 million in 1 year, which is out of for a county of our size, that's an inordinate increase. It doesn't make any sense at all. So, so that is the financial piece of the puzzle. It's not actually, we're not actually taking money from the sheriff. The Board of Supervisors will be figuring out how to allocate that money.
Let me just say something real quick about the whole notion of defunding the police, because I'm not in support of it. And you know, whether you allocate money to another location, whether you cut back on overtime, which is what's going on here at LAPD, none of that will change the mindset of a patrol officer. As a patrol officer, I don't care what you do with money. I don't care who you give it to. I don't care where you move it. The only thing that I'm concerned about as a patrol officer are the things that affect me personally. And John, you know, the only thing that would get my attention is if you change to every other Wednesday, right? Payday. So unless and until you talk about doing things that are going to speak to the culture, that are going to actually deter the bad behaviors by those patrol officers, defunding, reallocating money will not speak to that.
Yeah, I agree, Cheryl. That's why it's really important to have people, you know, like yourself and Susan and others who have actually been in the system and are speaking about the importance of oversight, you know, noting the fact that the majority of officers are trying to do a good job and do a good job. But what are the issues we have in the culture that have not been addressed and won't be addressed without oversight? So thanks, Cheryl. Appreciate that. Chris, do we have any more?
No unanswered questions that I see. I do want to point out that I did put the link into the chat, socoeffectiveoversight.org. You can, here's the page there. You can find the ordinance, the endorsers, you can make a donation. Lots of very, very good and useful information there. And the SOCO Effective Oversight. It's in the chat.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Chris. We are at our time. I want to thank the panel members for giving us the time and sharing their knowledge and experience with us. I want to thank, you know, Chris, thank you so much. Chris, I know you've been in the trenches with this issue for a long time, and I'm personally grateful for it. And Helga as well, with the series that we're doing on, we call it criminal justice or injustice.
Oh, no.
So depending on your experience with law enforcement, it could go either way. So, and thank you all for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. And keep in mind the website, anything that you can do at this point is appreciated. And spread the word, because this is a grassroots effort and we need everybody involved. And November 3rd is, again, only 5 weeks away. So please, 4 weeks away. So please help in. Anyone like to add anything before we sign off?
I just wanted to answer one question that came through that I think is really important.
Okay.
Marcia asked if there'd be revised training to assist the police in not acting like they did in the video. We can only hope. It starts with being trained correctly to begin with, and then having that supported within the department. And when I say supported, all the way to the top.
Right.
So if you have a sheriff who isn't really paying attention and commanders who aren't really paying attention, and you know, that chew time is tolerated and offered to the dog to keep him happy and interested, then you're going to have these issues come up. Training is kind of a funny thing. The Post Commission, Peace Officer Standards of Training, has to approve various training or remedial training classes. And until they do, it's never mandated that someone has to go through that. It's a good idea. If someone acts like this one canine officer did, I would, as a chief, I would want to make sure that he had control of his dog. That, was it the dog's fault and the dog wouldn't pull off, or was it the handler's fault and he just didn't know how to handle the dog? And then send him back through training to see if he'll pass, and if he doesn't, take the dog away from him. But not all chiefs do that. It's, you know, hey, you got a good bite, way to go. Or, you know, they go on about their business and no one even acknowledges it. So training's difficult. Training is very difficult.
It is.
Which it wasn't.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. So thank you all. Remember, any amount that you can give us, we need. We've got signs. We're working on social media. We've got a great website that's just about to go up. We need more virtual meetings. Anything you can do, please keep us in your thoughts. And any ideas you have, please get a hold of us through the website. And you know, we really appreciate your help, and it's time. You know, it's time to do this. So thank you all very much. If there are no concluding remarks, we're...
John, I do see one hand. I'm sorry, Claire.
Oh,
I
that's
think
fine. No, that's fine.
we'll make this the last one though.
Okay.
Well, I see on my screen that it says we were recording this, and I think this was an excellent program. It was short enough and to the point enough that it should be used again. And I would love to see our congregation encouraged to see, we should definitely show it again so that more people get this, because this is important. And I think, John, I hope you can use it again, because it was really good.
Yeah, I think so too. Thank you very much. I do. I think it's important to hear from the kind of speakers we had on our panel. And it goes to educate us. Again, this is not oversight is not a negative thing. It's a positive tool that takes us to the kind of policing we want in a democratic society. And that's what it's all about. And that's what we all want. And that includes the officers themselves. So, you know, we'll use this and work on. So thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
All right, you guys, everyone take care. And again, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, y'all. Fight the power.
There you go.
Bye. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Chris, I'm about to end it. Is that okay in terms of the recording?
Oh,